Welcome to the Product Bakery podcast. My name is Christian, I'm Alex, and together we present you the ingredients to build the right products. Hello again and welcome to the Product Bakery. My name is Christian and I'm here today with Alex, my dear co-host. Hi Alex.
Hi Christian.
So I hope you had a great Easter break.
Absolutely, I had just got back actually from my nice trip through Turkey. Seems, I feel like I'm still traveling a bit too much, but everything corona-free and tested. Happy to be back to reality. What about you, Christian?
Me too. I also back from a nice, relaxing weekend. But yeah, I think as you, it hit me today with going back to work and taking care of what needs to be taken care of. But before we get started, Alex, I want to say thank you to our audience for the amount of follows, likes, and also comments on our website. And for sure, I want to emphasize you to continue doing so and sharing our content to grow and grow even faster. Alex, I think we promised a while ago to talk about how we got started with the podcast from a product management and design point of view. And I thought we should keep our promise and start sharing how we got started with the podcast back then.
So, how to launch your podcast as a great podcast
From a product management and design point of view.
How a product manager launches products. And I think we see anyway more and more podcasts being launched. And I guess thanks to Corona or because of Corona, I don't think we should thank Corona, but it's definitely a format that is getting even more popularity than it used to already have. Yeah, super excited to share a little bit more and maybe get some people inspired to share their stories with everyone.
Yeah. And I remember I started listening to podcasts in 2012.
It's
quite a while ago.
Around for some time.
I also had a couple of breaks in between, but I
what
remember.
What did you use in 2012?
iTunes.
Oh, of course. They always had their
back
podcast.
Then you had the iTunes app that was actually used for everything. And there was a German podcast called Bits und so. And they were talking about Apple products, Apple software updates. I think there were 3 guys back then, and there was no function of listening into double speed. So I was just taking 1 hour, 1.5 hours and listening to their conversations and trying to be as updated as possible on Apple products and the software. So that's how I got started. But it's also interesting to see how that has shifted, because back then I was only listening to one podcast, and these days people listening to more than one, except the Product Bakery, I would say. But yeah.
How many podcasts are you currently listening to, Christian?
So right now 2. How about you?
Which ones?
So apart from the Product Bakery, you mean?
No, so you're listening to our podcast?
Okay, I think I cannot count that, but I'm listening actually 2 German podcasts. So one is from Christian Bischoff. It's a motivating podcast from a coach, as well as Gemischtes if I want to laugh and hear some trash talk.
Nice.
I also have to say right now, I'm taking a break from product design, organizational things podcast, because sometimes it's just like too much.
Yeah.
Actually, I shouldn't say that, right?
I mean, it depends, right? You have to listen to our voice as well when editing. Yeah. I totally get. I have to say, I also use I listen to different kinds of podcasts. Like I have this podcast like when I'm outside going for a walk, where I want to listen to something lightweight and something more fun. So I'm listening to my favorite comedians here around. And then it also depends. I honestly sometimes go and look, like simply search for specific topics that I'm curious about and listen to single episodes. Besides like the ones that I'm following, there's a podcast around like investments that I'm following at the moment, like general financial markets. There's one around cryptocurrencies, like especially the smaller coins.
Forgot to mention that. Yeah, I do the same.
Yeah.
I listen to some, but not specific ones, but whenever I see some good podcast recommendations on Twitter regarding crypto investments, I just pick them up.
Yeah. And I think there's this difference, right? Do I want to consume knowledge? Do I want to listen to some people because I care about what they say, or do I simply want to follow some conversations which makes me feel like I'm sitting in the room with some guys and listening to whatever they're talking to? Yeah, I think there's something for everyone, but we wanted to tell you how we started the product bakery. And I guess if you've been following our first episodes, we mentioned that we were sitting in a park, having our burger, whatever. But that's only where the story started. That's where we had the idea. But from there, how did we make it happen?
And I think also, why did we sit together to talk about it at some point, right? Because the problem that I was facing back then when I was listening to products and design podcasts, I was realizing that quite often there are discussions around the perfect world and the perfect state and how very amazing and successful companies are interacting, which is at one point very inspiring. But on the other hand, I was sometimes like, okay, but how do I get there? And I was always missing like the podcast that goes really into the depth, that helps me to really understand the little steps and the little nitty gritty things you have to do in order to get there. And I think that was back then my motivation to get started with a podcast, even though I would say sometimes we do it better, sometimes not. But the goal is to provide the extra mile of information that you maybe don't get when you listen to or read a book like Inspired, which is super nice, but also very high level.
So, Christian, you're the product manager between us. So, as a proper product manager, what are the steps that we took or that someone has to take if they have an idea and they want to make it real, right? And they want to start their own podcast?
I would say you and I, we were lucky because we had immediately the branding. So we know Product Bakery, it's a nice name. It's nowhere on the internet, so just took it. And that's what we actually did. Right after our conversation, I went back, I just bought the domain. I just set up a G Suite account. I set up some email addresses. And apart from that, a Google folder structure, a rough ones for our episodes, for our interview guests, a little bit of documentation from our side. And next to that, the last thing that I was doing back then was just setting up an empty Trello board. I didn't know what to do with it, but I knew that you will.
Yeah, of course. A product manager needs a project management tool. But yeah, this ticks off a little bit like one of the first steps, right? The organizational part, or let's say having the domain, having a name, having the branding around it, as lo-fi as we made it, and it still is. We took the low fidelity very literally when we created our croissant. But yeah, I guess from there are a couple of important steps, right? I mean, our concept was that we invite people and that we talk to people. So we needed to have these people. And I think one of the first steps that we then did in this Trello board, besides having our classic to-dos, which we then separated, and I think like everyone who works in sales would think at it like a little bit like as a sales pipeline. But we created this board where we had some ideas around potential candidates. Let's call them leads. And then the different stages also of how do we reach out to them? How do we schedule them? When do we record with them? What are the topics? We thought also about a process of, okay, how do you work with interviewees and guests to make sure that we tackle the topics that they're currently interested in or that are currently top of their minds? How does it fit our overall concepts and so on, up to the final podcast launch? And I think one big step for us was also understanding what does it mean to even record a podcast.
Yeah. And I think here also, apart from product manager and product designer, I would say, I mean, you and I, we are a team. And if we see this as a kind of entrepreneurial project or however you call it, right? So you have two founders in quotes, you have two different types of personalities. And therefore, we also split up our work. I focused a lot on reaching out to people and spamming them until they say, yes, I join, leave me alone.
But that's what you can do best, right?
Exactly, that's what I can do best. And on the other hand, you spend a lot of time in researching the tools and understanding how we can cut episodes and what's the best way to record and what is the best hardware to use, while I'm sometimes not the best person in doing so. We just naturally identified, actually without talking, right? We just did it. So you just told me, hey, Christian, I'm going to take care of that. And I said, okay, I'm going to reach out to people. And we just start realizing we both have our strengths in certain areas, and we just try to make it work.
Yeah. And I think it's also a little bit like the bias to action, right? It wasn't about, okay, who like under which role it falls. And I think small, I'm now using the metaphor of a startup, but small teams usually don't look at, okay, whose responsibility is it? They simply do things, and then it comes a little bit natural. And I think this is also a little bit like the idea behind having cross-functional and small teams that can act fast and be agile or lean. I think lean is the right word. Yeah, and I think that's a little bit like how we did it. What should we talk about, Christian? Should I talk about tools? Is that relevant? Should we talk about, you tell me.
Yeah, we should both talk about it. No, I think one thing that it's also maybe interesting to share is the way of iterating and the way of, so tooling is definitely very important, but it goes a little bit hand in hand to me on the format that we're planning, because we said we definitely want to do interviews with experts or people who are very deep in certain topics. Like a couple of weeks ago, we talked to Matthias Kluge, who gave us deep insights on churn, or since a while ago, we talked to Markus Hafellner from Bitmoving about stakeholder management and pricing. We thought it's really nice to have conversations that go very deep and also sometimes more high level. But then we realized we could do more. At the moment, we are launching twice a week. So we are having also the conversations between you and me, where we're experimenting with different formats. For example, recently we just picked up stuff that is happening in our day-to-day business, but you just came up with the idea of
product reviews.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point, right? It's also a little bit about, we're all not really podcast professionals. Like, we didn't have a single clue. It was terrible for me to listen to my own voice in the first episodes. It felt all super awkward. I think now it's getting a little bit more, you get more comfortable with it over time. But obviously we followed this approach of like just getting started. And I think that was also important for me to not like overplan it, because I think otherwise I would, like, knowing myself also, I would have never done it. And I think as we simply started inviting people and figuring it out on the way, and then we said it from the beginning, let's keep it iterative. Let's follow test and learn MVP kind of approach. And yeah, the product reviews were just like an idea. I mean, we are all working with different products and different tools all the time. And I think besides use cases and, let's say, theory also on how to approach product development as a product manager, as a product designer, as a developer, agile coach, whatsoever. It might also be interesting to simply take tools and look at them and look at, okay, what was the job to be done that they were trying to solve? How did they solve it? What is good? What is maybe bad? I don't know. And I think as I said, we see so many things that sometimes it's actually really interesting also to have a professional conversation around that one. And so,
and I think it's also a good idea to sometimes just hate and blame certain products that just fucking suck.
Yeah,
not to destroy the people, just to inspire them to improve their products and get feedback in a different way.
Yeah. Which leaves us again to, right, we're always super happy when someone writes us an email or leaves some comments, right, on how we can improve. Because as I said, we're learning, we're changing the format, we're not religious about it. We're not like, I don't know, we have no famous names or something that we can, or that we have to stick to and follow religiously. Yeah. For us, it's a fun project, and it's really nice to meet great people. And we're slowly getting more comfortable to talking to a microphone, knowing that people are listening to us.
Yeah, but the community effect is something that I love, because since we started, we connected to many people who reached out to us, gave us a lot of feedback on things we can do, people we can talk to, things that can be improved. So it makes a lot of fun to just grow when it comes to meeting people and also getting input and inspiration. And just that you mentioned at the beginning this topic of cryptocurrencies, I see a lot of similarity there because the whole product roadmap of cryptocurrencies is defined and decided by communities. So they vote on what should be built next. And that's also what we're doing with our podcast is talking to people, getting the feedback, and then just adjusting and changing the plan if needed. So if you liked one of our formats or if you would like to see a different format, you can always reach out to us and give us some input and share some wishes and thoughts
If you
around
want
a
us to
certain
just
topic.
like shut up because you think that we talk too much.
With that, thank you very much and goodbye.